Hi, everybody. Thanks to the more than 100 participants at this point. Glad you were able to spend some time with us this afternoon. I'm Joe Ross. I'm an associate professor of biology, and I want to start by pointing out something that I think everybody is probably familiar with, which is the concept that letter grading is completely arbitrary. And I'd like to couch this in terms of how we might actually leverage that fact to improve a concern that I've been hearing about a lot recently, which is how to cheat proof exams when they're given online. And so this graphic I created mainly from data from this review, Derm in 1993, who had taken a look at the history of grading in the United States and different institutions and when they started using different grading practices. And in 1785 was the first record of any sort of school in the US, this was Yale, I believe, that was sorting students into bins based on their academic success. And by 1877, Harvard was the first school who had set discrete thresholds of you have to get to this, say, percent of points in the class to earn a particular grade. And that's something that's been played with ever since 1877 at different institutions. And somehow we all settled on this idea that 60, 70, 80, 90% should be the cutoffs for the letter grades D, C, B, and A. But this graphic is meant to remind us that we have flexibility. We don't have to do 60, 70, 80, 90% D, C, B, A. And so what I'm proposing today is something that you've probably already considered. It's definitely not a new idea. I'm sure somebody else had it before I did, which is the column on the right, where I'm proposing that one way to deal both with making grading less arbitrary and also helping cheat-proof exams is to have a 20, 40, 60, 80, 100% division of the 5-letter grades to span the entire breadth of the percentile range. So next slide, please. So the way I do this, and to make it more purposeful, is I considered aligning the letter grades with Bloom's taxonomy. So that if all students could do was to perform remember type tasks, the base level of Bloom's taxonomy, then if that's all they were able to do, that would earn them an F, which is foundational. You'll notice here, I've had a little bit of a student mindset trick here. I've renamed the grades. So foundational learners, maybe all they can do is remember type tasks. And maybe the developing D grade, what you need to do as a student to be able to show proficiency there is to, as shown here, maybe explain or summarize or describe or diagram something in your class. And 2 points here are really salient. One is, I think is clear, the higher up Bloom's taxonomy you go, the harder it is to Google the right answer to that type of question, because those verbs are more like creating, analyzing, interpreting. So it's hard both to Google the answer, and it's also hard to get that answer shared from another student and just plop it into your exam, because then it would be obvious as copying, if it's an essay, for example. So the minor tweak that I also suggest at this point is one more thing, which is after writing a test, I look at all of the questions that I've written and I assign them which type of Bloom's level was that question. Was it an F type, a D type, a C type question? And I think the really most important thing is that then I go back and I weight all of the questions so that 20% of the total points for the exam are F level and 20% of the points are D level questions, 20% for C, 20% for B, and 20% for A. That's that instructor task. The only thing you would do differently is make sure that all of these different types of Bloom's level questions have equal weighting in terms of points on an exam. Next, please. This is just an example from an upper division class I teach, genetics, which is required for all biology majors. It tends to be juniors in this class. And last fall, I've been doing this for several semesters now, but just as an example, last fall I had 60 students in this class. And there were 7 questions on this exam. Each question is represented by a column. And I've noted which Bloom's level I assigned each of these questions to. One question was an A range question, one a B type, one C, one D, and 3 different F remember style questions. And then below those are shown the number of points I assigned to each. So I have a 15-point exam total. I have 3 points for A, 3 points for a B type question, and so forth. And what I expect to find is what I see. Most of the students in the class, the y-axis, up to about 93% of the students all get full points for one of the F-type questions. And then it tails off as I get towards harder and harder, higher and higher Bloom's level questions. Now, this is a little bit an erroneous way to present these findings, because what I'm plotting is the percent of students earning full points. That is 100% of the points per question. In these questions, the A, B, C, and D type questions, there was an opportunity for partial credit. So if you'll go to the last slide, please, or the next slide, this shows the actual letter grades from the exams, or from the students for that exam. And it looks almost like a bell curve, which is what I expect for, and I personally hope for. And so this is, I think, a great way to move points into the higher letter grade categories so that they can be used both to distinguish students that may be near an A or near a B, and also to introduce some more difficult, maybe cheat-proof or at least cheat-resistant types of questions into exams. So final slide, please, Brian. Thank you. So this is a summary. I think this is a great approach, both because it's transparent, which I think is really important. At the start of the semester, I provide this letter grade rubric to the students. I don't just tell them how many percent of the points they have to earn to get a particular letter grade. I show them what sorts of tasks they need to do in terms of verbs, letter grades, or Bloom's levels, verbs. And as an aside, my last point will be, it also helps me write letters of recommendation, because I can actually explain what it means to somebody else that a student got an A or a B or a C in my class. So with that, if you have any further questions, please paste them into the Google Doc or into the chat. And my contact information is here on the slide. So if you ever want to get in touch, I'd be happy to talk about this more. Thanks.